For nearly all of human history, we shared this planet with other humans. Go back 50,000 years, and Earth wasn't home to just one kind of person. It was home to several, all living at the same time. Some resembled us closely. Others were shaped by environments so extreme they'd break anyone alive today. One group settled on an isolated island and shrank to barely 3 feet in height. Another left behind so little evidence that almost everything we know about them traces back to one tiny bone. And somewhere in the mix was us. Now only one human species remains. Not because we were the toughest, the smartest, or even the first ones here, just because we're the ones who made it. And that leaves an unsettling question hanging in the air. Where did everyone else go? The real answer isn't dramatic. It's slow, tangled, and pieced together from fragments. To make sense of it, start with the species that outlasted every other, Homo erectus. Homo erectus emerged roughly 2 million years ago. Put that in context. Every human achievement you can think of, every civilization, every conflict, every language ever spoken, happened in only the last few thousand years. Erectus existed for a timeline so vast that the whole of recorded history barely registers next to it. Their skeletons were the first to resemble ours. Long legs, shorter arms, a body clearly built for covering ground on foot. They were likely the first humans to ever step outside Africa, spreading into unfamiliar territory and surviving conditions they'd never adapted to beforehand. Their brains were smaller than modern humans, but a major leap beyond earlier ancestors, and their toolmaking stayed remarkably consistent for hundreds of thousands of years. That might look like stagnation, but it's really the opposite. Their design simply worked, so there was nothing forcing them to change it. Eventually, though, the world moved on without them. Their final populations were stranded on the island of Java, isolated from the mainland, with no route to new land or other groups. Their hunting grounds kept contracting, prey became scarce, and with no way to rebuild their numbers, a species that had endured for nearly 2 million years quietly ran out of road. Their youngest fossils date to about 110,000 years ago. After outlasting almost everything nature threw at them, Erectus vanished. Then there are the Neanderthals, arguably the most misjudged species in our family tree. For years they were dismissed as slow, brutish cavemen. That picture was never accurate, and every new discovery makes it less so. Neanderthals were engineered for survival. Thick-boned, broad-chested, powerfully built, with heavy brows and wide noses that pre-warmed frigid air before it hit their lungs. Their brains were, on average, even larger than ours. They hunted massive, dangerous prey up close. Their skeletons show the same kind of injury patterns you'd see in professional bull riders today. They controlled fire, crafted advanced tools, and mounting evidence suggests they deliberately buried their dead. Neanderthals occupied Europe and Western Asia for over 300,000 years. Then, around 45,000 years ago, Homo sapiens arrived in the same territory. For a stretch of time, the two species coexisted, and DNA proves they interbred. But sharing that landscape brought new strain. Both species competed for the same prey and the same resources. Sapiens, however, lived in bigger, more interconnected groups, able to trade resources and knowledge across long distances. Neanderthals stayed in smaller, more isolated clusters, which made bouncing back from hardship far harder. Meanwhile, the climate kept swinging between extremes, destabilizing their environment further. Their populations shrank, their genetic diversity dropped sharply, and by roughly 40,000 years ago, they were gone from the fossil record entirely. No single event ended them. It was competition, climate, and shrinking numbers working together. Next are the Denisovans, a species we almost can't see. Their story starts with a single finger bone, found in a Siberian cave in the Altai Mountains, small enough to fit in your palm. When researchers pulled DNA from it, nothing matched. Not Neanderthal, not sapiens, not anything on record. It was an entirely unknown branch of the human family, hidden inside the genetic code the whole time. Since then, only a few more fragments have surfaced. Some teeth, a jaw piece recovered high on the Tibetan plateau, and little else. Yet their genetic fingerprint is massive. Denisovan DNA still shows up across parts of Asia and the Pacific, with some Melanesian populations carrying up to 6% of it. Tibetans even inherited a Denisovan gene, EPAS1, that lets them thrive at altitudes where most human bodies would shut down. A species we've barely found physical traces of is still shaping how people survive today. As a living population, though, Denisovans faded out around 30,000 years ago, spread thin across a wide range, and thin populations rarely survive when conditions shift. Then comes one of the oddest chapters in the human story. In 2003, on the Indonesian island of Flores, researchers uncovered remains unlike anything documented before. A human standing barely a meter tall, with a brain roughly the size of a grapefruit. Skepticism followed immediately. Some assumed the bones belonged to a modern human with a growth disorder. But as more evidence emerged, it became undeniable. This was its own species, Homo Floresiensis. This miniature human shared its island with Komodo dragons, giant storks, and dwarf elephants. Isolation does strange things to evolution. Large animals shrink, small animals grow. And Floresiensis may be the most extreme example of that pattern in our entire family tree. Their fossils range from about 100,000 to 60,000 years old, with tools suggesting survival until roughly 50,000 years ago, right around when modern humans reached the region. We don't know exactly what happened, but on a small island, a species doesn't need a catastrophe to vanish. Sometimes a shrinking population under new pressure simply runs out of time. So why are we the last ones standing? Intelligence seems like the obvious answer, but it doesn't hold up. Neanderthals were sharp. Denisovans charcoal extreme environments. Erectus outlived us many times over. And Floresiensis survived conditions that would wreck a modern human. What actually set us apart might be something less obvious. Our ability to connect across distance. Sapiens didn't just form groups. We built networks. Tools, knowledge, and techniques spread between communities at a scale and speed nothing else matched. When one group faced disaster, what they'd learned had already traveled elsewhere. When environments collapsed, we had the flexibility to adapt because we were never tied to one place or one method. But even that's only part of the story. Luck, geography, and timing all played a role too. We weren't guaranteed to be the last species standing. We just were. The other human species weren't rough drafts of us, or stepping stones toward becoming sapiens. They were their own kind of human, each surviving the world in a different way. Erectus lasted nearly 2 million years and still disappeared. Neanderthals weathered ice ages for hundreds of thousands of years and still vanished. Denisovans left behind almost nothing physical, yet their DNA still lives on in people today. For most of human history, we were just one branch among many. Now, we're the only one left.